Lebanon's countrywide protests erupted over a month ago.
The United States will continue to stand alongside the Lebanese people.
The protesters are accusing government officials of widespread corruption and hold them to blame for failing to put the brakes on a deepening economic crisis. Washington's made it clear it thinks those are injustices worth fighting against, not too different from its stance on Hong Kong. Insurrection began in June against a law that would have allowed extradition of Hong Kong's criminals to the mainland.
The Chinese Communist Party must honor its promises to the Hong Kong people, who only want the freedoms and liberties that they have been promised in the Sino-British Joint Declaration.
Over the past several months, there have been thousands of injuries and arrests. It's been a big challenge for Beijing, but for Washington, an opportunity. The U.S. State Department says the protesters are fighting for freedom and democracy, just like the ones in Iran. Iranians flooded onto the streets on Friday after a massive price hike for petrol.
The Islamic Republic must cease violence against its own people. The world's watching.
The government denounced those rioting and the people in Washington who contributed to the crisis with crippling sanctions. It might seem like the U.S. just loves to support chaos wherever it may be, but sometimes the government accused of injustice is a friend. Take Chile. Monday marked 1 month since the beginning of nationwide protests against rampant economic inequality. Thousands of Chileans rallied across the country to commemorate that day. So far, 24 people have been killed and thousands arrested. Washington's reaction? A travel warning. Bolivia is a pretty similar situation. The country's been gripped by protests in support of its recently ousted socialist president, Evo Morales. The State Department hasn't had anything to say about that. They instead backed the new regime's claim that Cuba is somehow to blame for Bolivia's problems.
Bolivia now joins Brazil and Ecuador in recognizing the Cuban threat to freedom. Bravo, Bolivia.
And when protests were taking place against Morales, Washington had something else to say.
The United States applauds the Bolivian people for demanding freedom.
Around the world, protests continue to rage. For the U.S., it's a great time to fuel the fire of popular anger, if it's for the right reasons, of course.
The United States, like in Hong Kong or in other parts of the world, like the Middle East, which I just left, United States is very much supportive of any uprisings, so-called uprisings, which are trying to destabilize the countries that they want to destabilize. Of course, in Bolivia, they were extremely supportive of some riots and some protests against Evo Morales. In a moment when their people get to power, like right now in Bolivia, United States totally switches and begins to support the government that was either put there by their own efforts or which is supported by the military, by junta, which was trained in the United States.